The biggest question everyone is asking at the moment is, will the ceasefire in Gaza last just days after everyone signed this agreement? In the next couple of days, there's supposed to be a ceremony in Egypt in which the American president is reportedly attending. The Egyptian president is inviting more global leaders to have a more of a backing to this agreement and apply more pressure on the Israeli side to take it as a given. That's it. You cannot go back to the war. There are many actions already being taken now inside of the Gaza Strip. Some of the areas have already been evacuated and cleared, and many temporary housing and refugee camps are being built inside of Gaza. The aid is going in, and there are preparations happening to release the Israeli prisoners of war, at least those who are alive. But so far, Israel had multiple breaches. Benjamin Netanyahu, firstly, did not speak about ending the war. Israel confirmed that it entered the first phase of the war. Our experience with these phases was that Israel constantly breached them afterwards. The situation now is a little bit more different in a sense of, well, there are more countries involved in the ceasefire agreement. Potentially, a multinational force will be inside of the Gaza Strip. And also, there are repeated confirmations coming from the United States officials that the war has ended. The American president is talking about an end to the war and long-lasting or everlasting peace in the Middle East. Of course, it's very difficult to believe the same president who just yesterday was threatening the Palestinian people with more hell and destruction and supported Israel's crimes and genocide, despite the fact that Israel was breaching its own agreements with the United States. The Israeli breaches so far have been as follows. Well, they killed more people now in Gaza, and they backtracked on the prisoners' names list that was handed to them by the Palestinian side. And that's something that is taking a lot of pressure from multiple parties involved. The reports that we're hearing now are as follows. The Egyptian side, alongside other parts of the mediators, are speaking with the United States delegation that, look, the Israeli side is now changing in the last second. They're even refusing to release doctors like Dr. Hussam Abu Safiya, for example, from Gaza, from the Israeli prisons to Gaza, although they're doctors, I mean, for heaven's sake. But that shows you the intentions of Israel and Israel's maliciousness in every single step, even when they go into an agreement, which isn't, again, surprising. At the end of the day, even the Palestinian side was aware of the fact that Israel might do these things and Israel might return to the war afterwards. But in a calculated move, they said that this will no longer be an excuse, the prisoners of war. The Israeli position globally isn't going to improve anytime soon. As a matter of fact, more calls are intensifying recently to have more pressure on Israel now after there was a ceasefire declaration to make sure they aren't able to conduct any such action ever again. They're talking about disarming the Palestinian side. No one is talking about disarming the genocidal war criminal entity that committed the most barbaric crimes in history inside of the Gaza Strip in the past 2 months, something that will require years for the Palestinians to recover from this mass trauma that they've been in, alongside the observers of this genocide too. And Israel, by its actions in Gaza, isn't only confirming that it isn't interested in anything to do with peace or de-escalation, it's also trying to make other regions go up in flames simultaneously with this ceasefire agreement that we're having inside of the Gaza Strip. And one of the latest things that the Israelis have done was this attack in Lebanon. Israel just carried out multiple strikes in Lebanon that killed a person and wounded several people. It wasn't even a military target. It was a plant where they were excavators in civilian side. That's, of course, alongside their constant targeting. This even led to the president himself in Lebanon to condemn these attacks and to say that Israel is trying to have another Gaza inside of Lebanon with more war and destruction, pressing again other countries to apply pressure on Israel as if again that's effective with Israel. Let's have a look at what Israel has done in Lebanon. So again, intense strikes they're carrying out in Lebanon, unjustified whatsoever. They're saying that they're targeting other, Hezbollah locations south of Lebanon, but the Lebanese confirmed, and there were videos well showing that they targeted excavators in South Lebanon. According to Israel, this was a place where Hezbollah uses to restructure and reorganize in south of Lebanon, in the south of Lebanon. And one of the buildings that were targeted actually belongs to the head of the parliament in Lebanon, Nabih Berri, who is allied with Hezbollah, which is a clear political message too, because this man plays a mediation role. He's a mediator between the American side and also officially the Lebanese state and Hezbollah on the other side. And through him, there were the agreements to reach a ceasefire and also de-escalate inside of Lebanon. But from an Israeli perspective, they clearly aren't interested in anything to do with de-escalation. And as a matter of fact, they're talking about an expansion of the war now inside of Israel, talking about a regional war that can actually start to take place very soon. And that Israel, from its perspective, it's getting ready for such a war alongside the regional players too, according to Israel. This wouldn't be for anything but Benjamin Netanyahu. This was one of the recent reports that came out in Israel following the ceasefire in Gaza. The region is preparing for another war. And there's talking about the Iran allies or Iran acts, as they called them. They're trying to have more escalation with Lebanon, with Syria. Perhaps they could do something with Iraq as well. And also targeting Iran, which is still very heavily on the table. The war with Iran didn't go anywhere. The war with Iran is only a matter that was set aside temporarily from an Israeli perspective. And previously, before Israel attacked Iran, in their recent escalation that led to the 12-day war, there were talks at the end of the day directly between the United States and Iran too. Yet Benjamin Netanyahu went on this attack. It depends on several factors. Number one, will Benjamin Netanyahu be able to hold on to his coalition that he's so keen and hell-bent on even after this ceasefire agreement? Or will it go towards a collapse? Before the 12-day war that Israel had with Iran, there was a motion in the Israeli Knesset to dissolve the government. Benjamin Netanyahu, when he started the war with Iran, he delayed this move and, as a matter of fact, bought himself more time to continue. Will Netanyahu be able to do such a thing now? Or is he going to fail? That will lead him to escalate with any other country, primarily Iran, because he knows Iran will definitely be responding. He knows that the Yemeni front de-escalates when there is a ceasefire in Gaza. Although from a Yemeni perspective, they said that we are keeping an eye on all of the situation in Gaza, and if something happens, we're there. One of the political leaders in Ansarullah said that the decision whether to close the Red Sea lies in the hands of Hamas. They have millions of fighters in Yemen. We are their fighters. So this is clearly showing that from a Yemeni perspective, they're willing to enter. But if there's a de-escalation in Gaza, they wouldn't necessarily continue. This leaves us with Iran. They know that if they attack Iran, Iran is very likely to attack them back. And then Benjamin Netanyahu can all of a sudden sell it to the Israeli public that we haven't finished the job and we need to continue. So far, from his perspective, it's not looking very well. I mean, Steve Witkoff was in what the Israelis call the hostage square, where he was speaking to a group of Israelis in relation to the ceasefire, of course. And this is what happened when Steve Witkoff mentioned the name of Benjamin Netanyahu.
To Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Oh. Okay. To Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
The Israelis were furious after this. Well, not these Israelis, but the other part, which is the coalition. They were actually furious because there were these protests and booing. And they said this was a great evening, but a bad taste and a foul smell with these people, immense stupidity and pathological, irreparable hatred. It's shameful, according to several members in the Israeli coalition, Netanyahu's allies. They didn't like that, although it reflected the actual sentiment that's coming from many Israelis themselves towards their own prime minister, who delayed this agreement for 2 years when he could have had it from day one. And even now, he is breaking certain things to do with the ceasefire. Another very big reason why this war hasn't really ended isn't just the fact that Netanyahu did not say that the war ended, and he only spoke about a first phase. Israel's proxies inside of the Gaza Strip have been conducting a calculated operation after the Israeli withdrawal, something that led Hamas to redeploy many of its forces and ask for a general action against these collaborators. A broad campaign to deter them. We saw many of the Hamas police officers inside of the Gaza Strip, and Israeli-linked militias have been conducting certain operations in Gaza, and some of them already killed several Hamas members. So we have a situation here where the Israelis withdrew, at least from certain parts of the Gaza Strip. The Palestinian forces, they redeployed immediately. I'm talking about thousands, by the way, and much of their activity is to do with the reorganization, making sure the day-to-day life is proper, and also targeting collaborators that want to instill fear and terror amongst the civilian population after the Israeli withdrawal, in an act of, proving themselves to the Israeli side that we're still able to have some damage in Gaza. So you can still hear the gunfire in these parts where Israel withdrew from. And these militias that are backed by Israel are carefully targeting certain elements within Hamas wherever they can see them. One of them was the son of a previous leading figure in the armed wing of Hamas. And they're probably getting their intelligence from the Israeli side, because all of the areas that Israel was in have been planted with so many devices. People are finding spy devices in cement blocks and stuff like that in Gaza, which shows the intention of Israel to kind of try and have a proxy war even in these areas that they withdrew from, not confirming that the war has ended, messing around with the list now of the prisoners that the Palestinian side asked to be released, Now it's leading to repeated campaigns from the mediators and attempts to try and pressurize. And at the end of the day, after the prisoners of war, assuming all of them will be released in the next couple of days, Israel can go back and declare another war. Verbally, the American president is saying now, well, firstly, he's almost confirming that there's a genocide in Gaza. Firstly, he posted this statement from Hamas that mentioned genocide. Now he's saying if Israel goes back, its image is no good globally. And there will be something like ethnic cleansing in Gaza if they do return to the war. However, that's President Trump. That's not someone that can be relied on. There would be arguments on both sides whether he has really something behind these statements or if it's just empty talk. But at the end of the day, this is the same president who backtracked on many of his statements previously. This is the same president that supported this genocide ever since the beginning and up until now, supported Israel with whatever it needs, and passed Israel more money. Therefore, although there is definitely a ceasefire happening, an agreement has been reached, there are no assurances whatsoever. And even if we want to talk about the short term, not even the long term, the short term, what would literally happen in the days following the release of the prisoners of war? Will Israel resume its war or not? It's depending on the talks and the promises and certain guarantees. This is what we get. And although they appear to be more intense than before, there are no solid guarantees here. Many things were remaining in the open. Therefore, it's very difficult to judge whether this lasts, judging by the Israeli moves. And as a matter of fact, if Benjamin Netanyahu doesn't manage to stabilize his government now by delaying certain things to do with the conscription law or amending certain parts of the conscription law, having certain financial or economic reforms, anything of the sort, to try and please everyone in his coalition, have more attacks, he will potentially go on an all-out war. Either increase the war back in Gaza, or if he doesn't, which is what he did previously, open a full-out front against another country. In 2024, he declared an all-out war against Lebanon in the midst of peak pressure against him to reach a ceasefire deal. There were already hundreds of thousands of Israelis in the streets. When he started the war with Lebanon, all of the protests faded because all of a sudden they started to get attacked by Lebanon. Now Lebanon decided, well, at least the Lebanese resistance, that they're not going to give him that excuse to drag them into a war for his own political purposes inside of Israel, something that the Palestinian side might also be doing now with the release of the prisoners of war potentially. That would leave him with no other option but to either escalate with Syria or Iran, or decide that he wants a bigger attack in Yemen with simultaneous attacks on all other countries. Because having these fronts open from Benjamin Netanyahu's perspective is a very calculated move that he would want to use to his own advantage and own interest whenever he feels pressure internally and whenever he views that there is an element of risk against his government.